Hi, everyone. Mike Malatesta here, and welcome back to the How Did It Happen podcast. On this podcast, I dig in deep with every guest to explore the roots of their success, to discover not just how it happened, but why it matters. My mission is to find and share stories that inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you. On today's episode, I'm talking with an entrepreneur who started his first business as a teenager, and by the time he was 32, had 125 employees and $10 million in revenue. He then took everything he learned and wrapped it into a new business built to solve a major problem and transform an entire industry.
A lot of founders come to me and say, I just hate running my business. I want to sell it so bad. I'm so tired of running it. I hate my customers. My people are just a pain in the butt. And I just want to sell this company so bad. That is not the starting point to selling your company.
That's not the starting point for a dream exit. That's for sure.
No, nobody is going to buy your bunch of problems. And if you ever sell your company, I'm willing to bet after you do all the things you're going to do to get it sold, you're probably maybe going to fall back in love with it all over again. It's going to be well running. It's going to be humming. You're going to do all of those deferred decisions. You're going to get rid of those people you should have gotten rid of. You're going to do the hard work of recruiting the new blood into the business.
Bryan Clayton and I talk about video game unlock, why he wanted a fancy car but bought a work truck instead, and why he's fixated on working only on his best ideas. Here's Bryan Clayton. Bryan, welcome to the How Did It Happen podcast.
Mike, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity because I love talking to successful people in all walks of life, but I really, I zero in on successful entrepreneurs because that's how I like to define myself. And so, yeah, I'm very glad that it's Sarah that from your team that reached out. So happy to have you here. Folks, let me tell you a little bit more about Bryan, and then we will get started. So Bryan Clayton is, as I said, a successful entrepreneur and co-founder of GreenPal, an online platform that connects homeowners with local lawn care professionals. Since its founding, GreenPal has grown rapidly and now serves over 200,000 active users, completing thousands of transactions per day. The company has been recognized by several publications, including Entrepreneur Magazine. Feels cool to be in Entrepreneur Magazine, doesn't it, Bryan?
It was like one of those magazines I read as a kid. And like when we got mentioned in it, I don't know. I just felt like I had made it, even though nothing had changed.
Yeah. I sorry, folks, I'm just taking a little detour here, but I had an article published in Entrepreneur Magazine, and I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world. But as you said, nothing really changed in my life or anything, except that I can say, I've got an article published in Entrepreneur Magazine. Anyway, the story's been, the company's been recognized by Entrepreneur Magazine, which dubbed it the Uber for lawn care, which is an interesting thing because if you're the Uber of anything, you get people's interest. Moreover, GreenPal is entirely self-funded, which is a very rare accomplishment in the startup world. And as a startup investor in over 100 companies, I know that to be very rare, especially a company like this that's growing so fast. The company's been profitable since its first year of operation. And yeah, it's 30 million plus in revenue, a remarkable achievement for a bootstrapped startup. Bryan, I think, was kind of an accidental entrepreneur if I listened to a podcast that when I was doing my research properly, in that he was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee, and says he developed an early interest in entrepreneurship and started his first business at the age of 13, mowing lawns in his neighborhood. But as I recall you relating the story, you might have had some pressure to start from your dad. Am I getting that right?
Well said.
Okay.
A tad bit of pressure.
Okay. Well, we'll get into that in a little bit. Bryan, I ask everyone the same question to get us started. How did it happen for you?
Yeah, how did it happen? Well, it was a great introduction. Well, thanks so much.
Sure.
I wish I was a consummate entrepreneur and I was reading Entrepreneur Magazine as a kid. The reality was it didn't happen that way for me. I was playing too much Nintendo
Hmm.
I was playing too much Super Mario Kart, and my dad got tired of me spending all day playing Nintendo, and he said, "Hey, get off your butt. I got a gig for you. You're gonna go mow the neighbor's yard." And my dad was a military guy. He had served in the army for 30 years, and so this was kind of a military household. This wasn't a request. This was a direct order.
Hmm.
And he made me go mow the neighbor's yard, and I begrudgingly went over there and cut the yard. And then when I got done, he came back over and he said, "Okay, now time for quality control." And he walked me around the yard and pointed out all the places I didn't do a good job and missed spots and screwed it up. But then after that was the best part. I got paid like $20 in 1993 for an hour of work, and I thought, wait a second, this is awesome. This is where it's at, because up until then I had to like beg my folks for money when I wanted to go buy a pair of soccer cleats or something, and it was like a video game unlock almost. It was almost like getting to a level of the game I had never known about. And I remember the first thing I did was I went to my desktop computer, and on Microsoft Word or Works, we didn't have the good version. On Microsoft Works, made some flyers and passed them all over the neighborhood. And by the end of that first summer, I had more lawns to mow than I could handle, maybe 15 or 20. And I was making, man, I remember being 13 years old in the early 90s, making $500 a week cutting grass. And I just stuck with that. All through high school, I would get out of school and just mow yards till dark, and then all day Saturday, all day Sunday, because I was saving up for a car, and it was like my whole life changed from that moment forward, because I wanted to buy this fancy sports car, but instead of buying a fancy sports car that I was saving up for, when it came time to buy a vehicle, I bought a truck, because I realized, wait a second, I can make money with that truck. And that was a key like moment in my life where I realized I can go to work on my business, I can make money, and then I can put that in things that will make me more money. And so I bought a truck, and then graduated high school and had a couple of people working for me at the time. And then I went to college at night and kept working on the business during the day. Took what I learned in business school and applied it to my little business. And then by the time I graduated college, I had 5 or 6 employees, and just stuck with that little business. I kept growing it little by little over a 15-year period of time, eventually getting it to 150 people. And then it reached around $10 million a year in revenue. And then it was acquired by a big national company in the landscaping industry. You wouldn't think there's like huge landscaping companies nationwide, but there are a handful of them, and one of them bought the business. And so that's how it happened for me. That's how I got started as an entrepreneur. I never have had a job. I've always worked in the business or project that I was involved in, and I was very fortunate to experience life that way, because there's no telling how different it would be if I didn't have a business to invest all of my life's energy into.
Yeah. Right. So the car, what kind of car did you have your eye on and saving up for?
It was so back then in 1996, I really liked the Mitsubishi 3000 GT, which they don't make anymore. And every now and then I'll see one. Now it's a classic car. Believe it or not, that's a weird moment in your life when like your car, the cars that you used to love in high
cool
school,
car, right? Yeah,
are now the classic cars.
Yeah.
But and now I'll see one every now and then. I'm like, man, that was a good idea not buying that car, because that thing is a piece of crap. It was such a better idea buying the truck.
And buying the truck reminds me of I had Brian Scudamore from 1-800 Got Junk on the show a long time ago. Do you happen to know him?
I know that story. Yeah, I don't know him personally, but that's a hell of a story, and one that I can kind of relate to.
Yeah. And the pickup truck, like he related a story of his dad was a doctor, and he wanted him to be a doctor. And he was at a McDonald's, and he saw this guy with a truck that had signs on it, like so-and-so junk hauling. And he said, well, I could do that and make some money, right? It was just like, how can I put some money in my pocket? So anyway, the pickup story kind of reminded me of that. The And I think that's a $500 million company
Incredible.
now. So yeah,
I think there's correlation between the least glamorous and least sexy your idea, the greater the opportunity and greater your chances of success. And
yeah,
and whether it be me, I've got 23 years in lawn mowing. I never really wanted to be a lawn guy. It's not what I had, envisioned my life to be, was to be in this one business my whole life. But it was my lane. It was kind of my path, and his story as well. Hauling junk. It doesn't get less glamorous than that. But those are the opportunities that not everybody's looking to innovate in, and not everybody is chasing and going after. And you can outwork your competition a lot easier in those non-glamorous sectors.
well, I think and I'm glad you brought that up because and I'm not trying to one up anybody here, but I started driving a garbage truck when I was in college.
Nice.
And I've been in the waste industry ever since. I've started two companies, sold those, and I started out with in garbage. Then I moved over to portable toilets, pumping septic tanks. Then most of my career has been in industrial waste. So would handle everything. It's not glamorous. And for that reason, a lot of people think that's not something I want to do, but there are two advantages to it. You mentioned one, which is, when you have an unsexy service business, let's say, and you're a little bit better than all the other unsexy service providers, you can grow a really great business, recurring revenue business, decent margin business, all of those things. But the other thing, and I want to get your opinion on this, because this is what I believe, is that the work itself is very noble. I mean, you are doing great work, whether it's what we did or whether it's, junk removal. This is this is a problem for someone, and you've basically come and you take their problem away and they feel so much better. Right. And with lawns, it's the same thing, right? It's who doesn't want a beautiful lawn that they don't have to extend any effort to create, but your people create it, right?
That's really important to remind yourself of that, and remind yourself and map back to what you're doing and why it matters. You talk about the waste removal business. All you have to do is just observe anywhere in the country, whether it's Paris or New York City or something, when the waste folks go on strike, and you need to look at what a dystopian disaster the city becomes,
right,
in less than a week. It's comical.
And all of a sudden people start to really care. Like they start to see the value of what
suddenly waste management is like the only thing between us and going back 200 years.
Right.
It's like it's important to remind ourselves of that. We tied landscaping maintenance to increased sales, and we would go to apartment complexes and we would say, hey, what's your vacancy rate? You're at 89%. Okay. Well, we were at the Greater Nashville Apartment Association meeting last week, and they're telling us 95% is normal around here. And so how can we get you to 95% with landscaping maintenance? We think we can get you there with some better floral decor around the model, maybe an enhanced display around the street entrance to get people to come in, some better signage that we can help you with. So it's like what we did was important, so it was important to us, important to our team, but then we would tie that to our value proposition to differentiate ourselves from a really competitive marketplace.
Right.
It doesn't get much more competitive than lawn care. And it worked. It worked. It helped us know what we were doing mattered, and it helped us win more business.
So that's probably one example of how you would answer this question, but I'm curious how, as a high school kid, you start off, all of a sudden you got all the lawns you can handle, then you have more than you can handle, and I'm assuming you're hiring your buddies and stuff. You're going to college, you're running the business during the day, you're getting your education at night. I think one of the things that I'm really interested in is to go to 150 people with probably dozens and dozens of pieces of equipment, dozens of jobs every day. How do you, from a leadership capacity, Bryan, how did you keep up with it?
Yeah, it very much is like a video game. You work one level at a time, you mentioned earlier you started off in waste management. I'm sure that started off with a truck and a dumpster, and then and eventually you wound up in like industrial waste management, all these other things, and it's like, how did I end up from here to here?
Yeah.
And that's how the landscaping business was for me. It started off with a push mower, then me and with a better mower that I bought, and me and an employee, then eventually me and I got my second crew going. That was one of the hardest moments in running the business, because I was effectively doubling the company in one swoop, and then 3 and 4 and 5 crews, and then now I find that I have 10 employees, and nobody has ever taught me how to be a manager. Nobody has
Right.
ever taught me how to be a leader, and I'm doing it all wrong. Like, everybody that works for me hates me. It's like it's chaos every day. It's all I can do to like hold this together, and I just started like trying to read everything I could get my hands on. This is the early 2000s, so we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have a lot of blogs. Nowadays, you can learn these heuristics and these frameworks pretty easily. They're accessible, but back then they weren't. And so I'm having to kind of develop my leadership style through trial and error, and trying to learn how to become a decent manager. And it was a lot of doing it wrong for a long time. And what took me 15 years, now with everything I know, I could probably do in 2 or 3. But I had to just go through the school of hard knocks of going one level at a time, and then it took me 6-7 years to even know the difference between working in my business and on my business. And then I guess year 10, a third layer of working on myself. What was another thing that I wish I started off with. So, as a business owner, you should be doing all 3 of those. You should be working in the business, just making sure the trains are running on time, making sure customers getting served, making sure that that what needs to happen is happening. And then the second thing is you're working on your business. Maybe that's a Saturday afternoon thing. You're working on the employee training system. You're working on the marketing system. You're working on the accounting system to know if you're making money or not. You're working on these things one at a time. And then the third thing you need to be doing, and I wish I started this earlier, is you need to be working on yourself. Every business journey reaches kind of like the bottleneck of the founder's capabilities. How good a leader are they? How good a manager are they? How much into the future are they looking in terms of innovation, and because it's all kind of like scaffolding around the founder. So you have to work on yourself. And I didn't realize this till year 8 or 9 or 10 that was like a Sunday afternoon thing. I would just dedicate 4 or 5 hours to working on myself, whether it be reading a book or listening to nowadays listening to a podcast, or going to YouTube University or whatever.
Yep.
And that kind of moves. That's blocking, like the working on myself piece is block and tackling for whatever stage of the game I'm at. Maybe I'm trying to work on the marketing strategy, so I need to become a decent copywriter, or maybe I'm trying to shore up the legal side, and so I'm reading every legal book I get my hands on. So I think you have to allocate time for all 3 of those buckets. I wish I'd known that day one, but it took me a while to discover it.
What were you say you had 10 employees and they all hated you. What were you doing, or what did you realize you were doing that caused that to be the outcome? Because I'm sure that's not the outcome you were looking for.
No. Well, the first thing was the environment was disorganized, and we weren't making money. I was barely able to pay them every week, and I was barely able to pay my vendors. And so the environment sucked because I didn't have control of the unit economics of the business. I didn't really understand and map what I was pricing work for, because I was the lead sales guy as well as everything else. But what I was pricing work for and mapping that to what our unit economics were in terms of what it costs us to deliver a labor hour to the marketplace. It wasn't until I was able to get that operating core figured out, knowing, okay, I can pay these guys a competitive salary with some incentives, and it maps back to how I'm pricing work. And that works like a well-oiled machine. That took like a year to figure out. That solved a lot of the underlying reason why it sucked. And the reason why I was always at odds with my people was because the whole thing wasn't really economically viable. And if the
Yeah.
business isn't economically viable, it's a horrible place to be. It's a horrible place to work because you're always under stress. You're always trying to rush through the customer's experience. You're always cutting corners. You're always like pissed off. And so that was the first thing, fixing that. And then as time went on, and I was able to get to 20, 30, 40, 50 people, I had to work on my leadership style. And that was kind of another unlock to the video game of business was, okay, what is my leadership style? Okay, well, first off, you really have to care. You really got to give a crap about who your people are, what their story is, where they're trying to go in life, and how the business fits into that, and how you can help them get where they're trying to go, whether they're trying to put a kid through school or save up for a down payment for a house or buy a new car, or we had a lot of immigrant labor there. So there's a lot of folks that were sending money back home to Mexico and Guatemala, and we would look for ways, once I reached 50 to 100 people, we would look for ways to figure out, how does the business fit into where my people are trying to go? And you really have to care, like genuinely. And it took me 5 years to understand that, internalize that, and practice that and live that.
I mean, you said you sort of mentioned that you started, looking for books and doing those kinds of things. Did you join any organizations, like peer organizations or anything, to kind of help you get around other people who are in your shoes, Bryan? Or did you just kind of do your own school?
So I wish I had done more of the CEO coaching and things of that sort. One thing I did do right was I joined a industry trade group for the landscaping maintenance industry. And so I would go to this thing every year. And that was one place I would invest some money, whether it be $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 to go to this event. And one thing they would do in the event is they would host it at like one of the bigger companies in whatever metropolitan area they were hosting it at. So I got to see what a $70 million operation looked like in Chicago. I got to see what $100 million operation looked like in Las Vegas. And I got to see what their systems were, what their processes were, what their sales system looked like, all of these things. And that was like, 2005. There again, we still don't have YouTube. We don't have podcasts. That was the only way to learn. And that's how I was exposed to, like, man, these guys are doing things way different than I'm doing. And let me rob and steal a couple of ideas and bring them back to my operation in Nashville. And I mentioned earlier that if you can pick a non-glamorous, non-sexy kind of sector, that it can increase your odds of success. Well, that's how I experienced it. In Nashville, Tennessee at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of people operating a landscaping company at that kind of level of thinking.
Okay.
And so I was able to take that from like somebody who was 3 levels of the game ahead of me and bring it back to my little business. That helped me a lot. And that was one thing that I did do right. But I wish I had spent more time, with people who maybe were running similar types of businesses in my market. I could have learned from them. But, at the time, you're just trying to keep the lights on. I'm sure people listening to this, he's like, hey, listen, I'm just trying to pay my bills. I'm just trying to keep this business afloat. I don't have time for any of that kind of stuff. Well, you got to make time for those things. It's the things that are important but not urgent. If you can make time to maybe 4 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours a week for the things that are important but not urgent, in a year, 2-3 years, it can change your life in business.
Thanks for taking us through that. It's very hard to keep up, not just as a business owner, but as a leader, as things are growing, especially even if they're growing slowly. It's still hard to keep up and keep leveling up. And like you said, finding the information to help you. It's good to know that those people were willing to, in that association, were willing to share, I'm sure, because they're not competing with you, but they're in the same business in a different city. And so they're probably like, hey man, dude, this is what we do. Maybe it'll work for you.
Oh, it's so true. And I'll never forget this. And I still experience this today. And so I was out in California somewhere at one of these events, and here is the CEO of what at the time was the largest landscaping company in the country, probably the world. and he's giving a big talk about how they measure how they measure from pricing all the way down to execution of projects and profitability. And somebody asked him and read my mind. It's like, why are you telling us this? Why are you sharing this with us? Now, eventually, that company ended up getting sold for like $2 billion. A landscaping company, $2 billion. And somebody asked him, why are you sharing this with us? And why are you telling us this? And he said, because we know you won't do it.
Hmm.
He said, we know you won't do it. And so fast forward to my life now with building GreenPal, I still see this. Like I watched a YouTube video the other day, and it's a guy who was on the growth team at Uber, and he's talking about how they deployed $1 billion of marketing spend to figure out how they could get more market share in every city they operated in. And it was like an hour long talk on that. And I looked down, and the video has 2 likes and 27 views.
No kidding. So he's laying out the whole playbook on how to do it. Right?
Yeah, it was a talk at a conference that the lead marketer at Uber, when they were exploding, how they deployed $1 billion of capital in marketing spend, and it had 17, 20 views and 2 likes. So my point is like these things that are really, really tactical and hard to execute really aren't secrets. They're just hard to implement and hard to execute on. And so that's where the value is. And that guy was right. He goes, we know you won't do it. And I only implemented probably 10 or 20% of what I learned that weekend. Had I done 100%, maybe I would have had a better outcome when I sold the company.
So you mentioned the sale. I wanted to go there next. You sold the business in 2013. I think so, 1998 or so to 2013. And I think I was listening to you with someone else, and I believe you said it was a 2-year process, give or take, to sell the business. I think one of the things that people don't understand typically is what it takes to sell a business. I'm interested, if you're willing to share, what was going through your mind in terms of initiating this desire to sell the business, and then what was the process actually like?
Yeah, it's ideally you work a proactive plan where you say, okay, 5 years or 10 years from today, I'm going to sell the business for whatever, a range, and you work backwards from that plan. You do what Dr. Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about begin with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
This is a simple thing, but none of us do it. I know I have trouble with this. Like, let's begin with the end in mind. And if you can do that and work a proactive plan on how to get to that finish line, it'll make your outcome and your life a lot easier. If you don't ever want to sell your business, and you think it's going to be a lifestyle business or maybe something you're going to hand down to your kids or something, then that's a very different path than the path you're going to take trying to sell your business eventually. So I didn't do that. I just ran the business, as a lifestyle business. And I never had any plan to sell it, but there was some kind of weird thing happening that I didn't understand or was aware of. Like we talked about, working through AIM and how the journey evolves, and as you as a founder, you turn into a whole new person every year or two. You're running a business the right way. You grow into a completely unrecognizable person. It's weird. Like if you run a business really hard for 5 years, you'll watch a movie that you liked 5 years ago, and it just won't resonate with you in the same way. Like you're like, why did I ever like that movie? Because you're literally on another level now. You like different things. You understand things different. You've learned all these things that you never would have learned. You've overcome all of sorts of challenges and things. So you as a founder have evolved and matured. And that's how the first like 10 to maybe 12 years of building that company from, $1,000 to 10 million bucks. That's how I experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I plateaued. Like that passive kind of evolution, like what was gratifying to me, I didn't know, but that plateaued, and I spent 2 years kind of sideways where I wasn't growing, I wasn't evolving, I became restless and discontent with running the business, almost just like unsatisfied by it, and more annoyed with it
Mhm.
than enjoying it. And when that kind of like really just set in, I thought, well, maybe I should explore selling it. I go to these conferences and I listen to talks where these guys are talking about how they sold their company. Maybe I could do that. And from the moment I had that notion to the moment I was able to get the business sold and then help with the transition was about 2 years. And there was all sorts of things that I had to reverse engineer into the business, and really fix, whether it be key hires that I was sweeping under the rug and deferring, kind of doing myself in my spare time, or might be systems that I didn't have, or it could be accounting practices that I didn't want to spend the money on. It could be just ways we ran the business. There was a
Yeah.
lot of discretionary expenses that I could have, you know, not incurred, but I needed to now change my thinking and really manage from the spreadsheet and not from the heart. And so if you're going to sell your business, you really got to manage it from the spreadsheet, and cut and not manage from the gut and from the heart so much.
Mhm.
Because when you get to that point where you're going to sell it, you're going to get a multiple of EBITDA, and that's all that matters. They don't care about your customer relationships as much as you think they do. They don't care about the assets in the business as much as you think they do. They don't care about all these things that are important to you as the founder. The acquirer is going to care about one thing: how much cash do you print?
Yeah. Cash
And you
flow. Yeah.
and you better get to work on optimizing that, because it's going to take you 3 or 4 or 5 years to get that tune just right. And start working on that today. Begin with the end of the mind. Begin with the end in mind and work backwards.
I'm glad you took us through that because I've bought 23 businesses, sold two, invested in a lot, and I see the same thing over and over again. So for me, I think every successful entrepreneur deserves what I call the dream exit. And the dream exit is two things. One, you sell your business for its maximum value, and two, you are prepared for maximum purpose after you sell your business. And it's amazing, as you mentioned, how the number may be higher, but I always say 75% plus of entrepreneurs don't spend any time on either one of those two things. They never put they never put themselves in the buyer's shoes. If they did, would help them do what you said, right? That's improve the business dramatically. And they never think about, besides the money, they don't put much thought into what they're going to do next, after they sell it. So I thought that was really great advice. Run it by a spreadsheet. I call it, taking out the trash, just take all the trash out of your business, all the expenses
Yep.
you're running through it, anything that someone's going to look at and go, huh, so if that's like that, what's the rest of this business like?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it could be firing a couple people. You got to fire, but you're just making a weak decision and you're keeping them on, and
Yeah.
they're not producing. It's going to be that kind of stuff. It's going to be taking out the trash. It's going to be shopping a couple of vendors that you should be doing that anyway. And here's something that and I was guilty of this. A lot of founders come to me and say, "Oh, I just hate running my business. I want to sell it so bad. I'm so tired of running it. I hate my customers. My people are just a pain in the butt, and I just want to sell this company so bad because I just hate running this business. I'm tired of it. I want to be done with it."
Yep.
That is not the starting point to
That's
selling
not
your
a
company.
that's not the starting point for a
No,
dream exit. That's for
no,
sure.
no. Nobody is going to buy your
Yeah.
bunch of problems.
Right.
But if you ever sell your company, I'm willing to bet after you do all the things you're going to do to get it sold, you're probably maybe going to fall back in love with it all over again, because it's going to be well running. It's going to be well running. It's going to be humming. You're going to do all of those deferred decisions. You're going to get rid of those people you should have gotten rid of. You're going to do the hard work of recruiting the
Yep.
new blood into the business. You're probably going to fall in love with it all over again. I know I did when I took 2 years of almost taking the business down to the studs and rebuilding it. And so if you're feeling that way, don't put another notion in your head, oh, I just want to sell this thing, because that's just going to confuse you and mismanage your expectations.
Hmm. So you sell it, you get through the process, 2-year process, and then it looked like there was some overlap in the development of GreenPal with your other business. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. So tell us about that and how GreenPal got off the ground.
Yeah, so I saw this problem when I started GreenPal. I was really kind of solving my own problem. I saw this problem every day running my landscaping company, that people just needed basic services done. It was really hard for them to find, schedule, and pay a decent provider to do it, because even though we were a commercial contractor, we only did apartments, restaurants, banks, things like that. 100, sometimes more people would call us every week. Hey, will you come mow my yard? Oh, I see your trucks everywhere. And we had a value of running that company to always be helpful, no matter what, to try to help folks out. And so we would keep a list of names and phone numbers by the receptionist desk and say, hey, no, we don't, but here's 3 or 4 people you might call. And most of the time it would work out, but sometimes they would call us back and say, hey, I called those 3 people. One person came out, gave me an estimate. I hired them. Then they ghosted me. I left 2 other messages, but they never called me back. Do you know anybody else? And so I saw how this whole cycle was broken. And I thought, well, somebody's going to build a platform to make that run smooth, like ordering something on Amazon. And that was kind of in the back of my head.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, so then when I sold the company, I did take what I really thought I was going to do. I really thought I was going to take all the proceeds and just do passive investing and be just be a capitalist, Robert Kiyosaki,
Warren Buffett in training, or
yeah, right, yeah.
Okay.
If only. I read a book, The Cash Flow Quadrant, by Robert Kiyosaki, and he talks about the idea of just being a capitalist, and that sounded really fun to me. That sounded really cool. And I thought, man, I just want to do that. And I tried that type of lifestyle for maybe 3 months, and I got super bored and discontent all over again, because I think the answer to the question, if it weren't for me, then what? My business has always been the answer to that question. Why do I get out of bed, and why does it matter? The business has always been the answer to that question. So in my first company, it's like, well, if it wasn't for me, then there's 150 people that wouldn't get a paycheck Friday, and there's families with every one of those 150 people. That's 150 families. I take that very seriously. So that was, the business was really about that, and so that was gone, and now I don't have that. It was I didn't anticipate it, but it was a big void in my life, and so I thought, well, okay, maybe I just need to start another business. I really don't want to, because man, that first business was hard, and I don't want to just do that all over again, because that sucked. I thought, and this is literally what I thought. I thought, well, I should start a software company, because that'll be so much easier. That'll be like the game on easy mode. And I thought, well, I had this idea that an app should exist for this industry. I know, how hard could that be? I'll just pay some developers, they'll build it. And I'm telling some friends about this idea, and they're like, dude, that's awesome. I'll quit my job tomorrow and start that with you. And I'm like, well, I can't pay you anything, so let's not quit our jobs, but let's do this. So two friends joined me, and they became my co-founders, and we did just that. We pulled our cash together, and I didn't want to plow all the proceeds from my first company into the second one, and I was actually kind of scared of screwing that up. So I did take all that money and just put it all in illiquid real estate assets. I just bought single family homes, and so I couldn't screw that up, and I couldn't go backwards. But then I was kind of the poorest dude all over again. I didn't have a lot of cash. I had some cash flow, but I didn't have cash sitting around. And so that was a good move, because then I couldn't pour it all into this new business idea. So my 2 co-founders and I pulled together a couple $100,000, but this was still for them, credit card checks, liquidated 401ks, stuff like that. And we put it all on this idea of, you should be able to push a button and order a lawn mowing service. And this is how we think it should work. And this is how we believe it should look. And and we hired a development shop in Nashville to build what our vision was. Well, that took 10 months and all of our cash. And we released this thing. We called it GreenPal, and we released it, and it was like, if you build it, they will not come. and it was dead on arrival. It was hard to use, clunky, buggy. Like we didn't know the first thing about what we were doing, and so we kind of misdirected this development shop. And man, it was really, really, really hard to get it going. And we passed out a bunch of flyers to try to get 20, 30 people to use it, and they would all tell us the same thing, like all the reasons why it sucked, but they never told us, I don't need this. They never told us, like, in fact, when they told us everywhere the app sucked, you could tell like they were disappointed. Like they
wanted it. They wanted to use it, but it was too hard. Okay.
It was too hard. Okay. Yeah. It didn't fulfill the vision of push a button, lawn guy quotes your yard and does a great job mowing.
Yeah.
So like we took all of that as validation that, okay, this is a good idea, but we're so far off the mark. And we can't change order our way to success. We're not going to be able to like work with this dev shop to like make the million changes this thing needs. We're just going to have to learn how to code. So that was like a year in, and I didn't want to sign up for this hard journey of starting a business all over again. But at that point, like the opportunity just looked too good, and I was actually enjoying it all over again. It was humbling for me, which was kind of what I needed at the time, because here I just came off this exit. I thought I knew everything there was to know about business, and it turns out I didn't know anything. And so that, was kind of like passively fulfilling to me. And so I decided, hey, let's just keep going. And I made a decision that no matter what, from that moment forward, I was just going to be working on my best idea. And that was my best idea. I've had one good idea in a decade, and we just kept working on it. And we taught ourselves how to build software, taught ourselves how to code, and it took like 2 years, but we rebuilt the whole thing while we learned how to code, and little by little, we set a goal for 100 customers in a week to use it to transact, and that took us a year and a half, 2 years, and now we have 300,000 people using it, and it took a decade, but we got here by never giving up and just stacking the little small wins.
So what's been the hardest part of it? The software was definitely a hard part of it. Then you need service providers, and then you need customers. So I'll let you answer that question. And then
the hard thing, so starting it, I thought the hard thing was the coding. I thought that was what the hard thing was going to be, was the technology execution.
Yep.
And that was hard because we tried to pay somebody to do it, and that was a disaster. And then we had to learn how to do it. And it was like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life was trying to teach myself front end engineering. I'm not an engineer. I'm a blue collar entrepreneur. And so I kind of had to teach myself that. And my co-founder had to teach himself server side engineering. And that was really hard. And so I thought that was the hard part. But as it turns out, it's kind of like, let's say you wanted to be a musician and you taught yourself how to play the guitar, and you think that's the hard part. But then you realize, no, the hard part is getting 100 people to show up to my show. That's right. That's the hardest part. Like learning how to play the guitar, that's the easy part. Anybody in this game knows how to play the guitar great and sing great. Like that's table stakes. Try to get 100 people to show up to your show and buy your album. That's the hard part. And so that is what I had to learn the hard way. Is like, okay, no, that was all the building this damn thing and learning how to do it was the easy part. Now the hard part comes. How do you get people to use it? How do you get people to discover it? How do you get people to like it or fix the problems so they do like it? And what I learned was that building a business, whether it's a landscaping company or whatever, is hard, but it's a lot harder inventing a new product. Inventing something from scratch that does not exist in the world and putting it into the world and getting people to use it is a lot harder than just running a small business. And that was the hard part. And the way we kind of solved that was just making it super small, almost like experimental, just treating everything as an experiment. And we set a goal. We want to match 100 consumers with 10 service providers, and we don't want to worry about anything else. And let's just figure out everything we got to do just to do that. and let's just get through that level of the game. Maybe that's level 1 of the video game. Let's not worry about Bowser. Let's just get through level 1. And that's what we did. And we did that over and over again. And in the first 3 levels of the game, very much was talking to customers, talking to users, doing what Eric Ries, the author of Lean Startup, he says, get out of the building. Like, you got to get out from behind the laptop, and you have to get into a Starbucks with a customer who used your crappy product and let them tell you everywhere it sucked. Or you have to get out of the office and into a kitchen where your customer lives and let them show you everywhere that they were pissed off by your service. And if you do that over and over again, you'll it's like free R&D, and it's not fun. It's certainly not what I wanted to do. But it was what was required at that level of the game to get to level 2, and then so on.
Okay. And so fast forward, I think you just said, I had said 200,000, you said 300,000 active users. So how does someone become a user? Like, how's it work?
Yeah. So if you're a homeowner and you need a lawn mowing service, if your grass is 4 feet tall, maybe you've called around Facebook or ask friends and family, and like 2 guys have ghosted you already. You just go to greenpal.com, you pop your address in, and you'll get 3 or 4 quotes in what we hope for less than 60 seconds. These are providers nearby you. You can then read reviews about them, look at their pricing, see stats, and how often they show up on time, things like that. Hire the one that you feel is the best fit. They come out, they mow the yard on the day you want. They upload a picture when they're done, and you get that to your phone. And if it looks good, you just push and pay them. And if you liked it, you can just set a button, and it just happens every week or every 2 weeks, whatever you prefer, until it stops growing. And then if you're a vendor, if you're a pro, it's an operating system for you to run your whole business. You sign up, you get all free opportunities to submit quotes for lawns nearby you. You get hired for the ones that want to work with you. And then you've got a platform where you can see your whole route. You go from stop to stop, you upload photos of the work as you do it, and then you get paid within 24 hours. And then they pay a transactional fee anywhere between 5 and 20% based on how much volume they're doing in the platform to participate on the platform.
And so the consumer, the homeowner, does not pay a fee to you.
Yeah, it's like we could probably make more money if we, if we did charge them a fee, but we don't. One thing I hate is when I order a burger on DoorDash for $15.95 and I get to check out and it's $37 after all. It's like, what happened here?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I still want the burger, so I still pay it. So we could probably optimize that and charge them a fee, but no, they only pay the price that the vendor quoted them.
Okay.
They don't pay any processing fees or anything.
And where do you think it's going? Do you cover the whole US now? Do you do others? Or is there other services you're going to look at? Like, I always think about snow plowing because nobody needs their grass cut in at least a third of the country during the winter, right?
It's one of the challenging things about the industry is it's super seasonal, and so we are nationwide in the United States, in every city in the country. We've toyed with the notion of trying to go to Canada and UK and Australia, but honestly, we have so much more white space here in the United States. And it's weird. There's weird nuances when you're running a marketplace like this in terms of like buyers and sellers and liquidity and network effects. Every little city is its own network. And so for us, we do more transactions. We do twice the transactions in Knoxville, Tennessee than we do in a Seattle. And like, we're trying to figure out, why is that? And it's like, well, something happened with the network there that kicked it off better than over here. And like, well, let's make all of these run as well as the top 10, and let's solve that problem before we go super wide into other countries and things like that. So that's what we're working on now. We want to get to 1 million users, and we feel like we can do that just in the US. We do. So the gateway kind of use case is the lawn mowing for the platform, but we do facilitate and offer everything you need for the outdoors. So shrubs, mulch, seed, gutter cleaning, leaves, everything. And then 2 years ago, we added on snow plowing as a way to help our vendors in the north keep the lights on. when the lawn mowing does go away. And what we learned by that was keep the main thing the main thing. I mean, I thought it was going to be a 2-month project getting snow plowing up and going. It ended up becoming a 2-year project that consumed most of our developer hours, most of our customer support bandwidth, trying to figure out how to bolt on this seemingly adjacent service, which is really a totally different business, and keep the two kind of separate but understandable, was a lot harder than I thought. So that was a hard lesson. And so one that's going to kind of keep us focused on, okay, this is what we're the best in the country at.
Yeah.
We're the easiest way to order a lawn mowing service, flat, full stop. Let's just keep doing more of that rather than trying to go into all these other things.
Yeah. I think that's snow plowing. It seems so easy, right? It's just a driveway and whatever, but
it's a gnarly business.
Yeah. I mean, there's salt, there's the volume of snow is different every time.
It's always an emergency.
Yeah.
There's a short window to get it done. It's variable. It's not predictable. It's it's just hard. It's hard to Uberize it.
Before I let you go, Bryan, is there anything that I haven't asked you or that you want to leave us with?
Well, I think one of the themes we talked about, when you talk about getting started in the waste management business, I'm talking about getting started in the lawn mowing business, and where you ended up, investing in companies and doing all these things that are much more interesting. But it started with moving trash.
Yeah.
And my life is similar. I started with just a push mower, and not that I'm like where I want to be ultimately, but my life has taken on a much more interesting journey than it would have otherwise had I never started pushing a mower. And so I think, like, if you can look at your journey in life as a storyline like that, and you can look at it like is it a movie that somebody would want to watch? Is it an interesting story? And Donald Miller, the author of 1,000 Miles in a Million Years, he talks about this, where to live an interesting life, you have to live and you have to do interesting things. And for me, I'm reading that book and I'm like, yeah, this makes sense. My business is the thing that's causing my life to be interesting. And it is the thing to make the storyline to my life interesting. And I think if you can frame the challenges you're going through in business in that context of the storyline to your life, it can kind of help give you perspective of, okay, this is the part of the movie where the main character is going through this struggle and he does ultimately, or she gets through this, and that's what makes it interesting. Because looking back, every challenging thing I've gone through in 20 years of business, 5 years later, I was always glad it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just something that I always try to remind myself of and try to share with folks, is like, think of your business journey as a movie, and you're the main character, and you're going through the highs and lows, and that's what makes it interesting and rewarding.
Nice. The story brand.
Great concept.
Yeah, story brand. Well, Bryan, thanks so much for coming on and talking to us about your journey. I've had a lot of fun exploring it, and you're a great guest. So thanks so much for coming on, and good luck with GreenPal, and greenpal.com.
Awesome, Mike. Thanks for having me on your show. I enjoyed it.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the show. And before you go, I just have 3 requests for you. 1, if you like what I'm doing, please consider subscribing or following the podcast on whatever podcast platform you prefer. If you're really into it, leave me a review, write something nice about me, give me 5 stars, or whatever you feel is most appropriate. Number 2, I've got a book. It's called Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. It's an Amazon bestseller, and I'd love for you to read it or listen to it on Audible or wherever else, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can get it everywhere. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download it today so that you can have your very own copy. And if you get it, please let me know what you think. Number 3, my newsletter. I do a newsletter every Thursday, and I talk about things that are interesting to me, or I give more information about the podcast and the podcast guests that I've had and the experiences that I've had with them. You can sign up for the podcast today at my website, which is my name, MikeMalatesta.com. You do that right now, put in your email address, and you'll get the very next issue. The newsletter is short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you.